Let's start with the broad numbers. By October last year, we knew about 1.3 million people in the country were food insecure. Since then, we've started seeing some pretty alarming reports about harvests in the southeastern and the coastal regions of the country, essentially being 50 to 80% below average. So if we're already seeing these numbers that are this bad right now, how much worse could it get?
Well, it's probably going to get worse. And if you have seen the World Food Program report and FuseNet on the expectation of the long range that start from March, the indication is that the long range will probably be delayed and they'll be short-lived. That's long range for this year.
And that's usually important because in this market, a lot of our agriculture is rain-fed, one.
Exactly.
And second, you need that long period of rain in order to actually produce decent yields.
Exactly. But if you look back and see why we are where we are, Kenya has enjoyed a good harvest season since 2011. You remember 2011, nobody wants to talk about it.
2011 was
horrible
horrible.
It was a terrible year. Before that, 2009, the Horn of Africa famine. So 2011 was great. It was a bad year. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, almost up to 2016, Kenya has enjoyed very, very good harvests. Extremely good weather. Indeed, 2015 to 2016, remember January, February, there were rains.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? We should have had enough in stock, but also expect, because there's a cycle, for every 3 to 4 years, good years, you have to get one bad one. So the bad one is most likely going to be 2017.
Isn't that cycle shortening?
It
The
is
one
shortening.
between the good years and then the bad one kicking in?
Two things are happening. It is the period is shortening. We have data that showed it used to be 11 years, came to 8 years, came to 4 years. Now it's shortening probably to 3 years because of global warming and all of the climate change.
And last year was the hottest year on record.
No, exactly. But they are not only shortening, but the intensity is increasing. The intensity of the people affected is increasing. So like 2009, you had about 10% of the population. Now you would be talking about 5 million if you talk about 20%, because 10%, because Kenya has a population of 46 million.
Yeah.
So 4.6 million people. You are talking about 1.3. That may increase to probably 2 or 2.5 within the next 1 or 2 months.
Wow. Okay, those numbers look pretty bad. But let's get back to that question of the good times. Last year, the government was buying maize from farmers at about $23 a bag, and that's a 90-kilogram bag of maize. So, I mean, presumably, at face value, we should have had sufficient stocks to deal with this problem.
First of all, let's differentiate the price that the government offers to farmers, because how much maize does the government buy?
Well, not much.
They buy probably in a significant proportion compared to the production. So if the production is 45 million bags, government is only buying 2 million bags.
Yeah.
So forget about the government buying. The problem in Kenya is that agriculture production and productivity, particularly in maize, has stagnated over a long period of time. So it doesn't matter what the annual incentives are like.
So the state doesn't have the market power to actually change anything in terms of consumption or even strategic reserves?
No, because first of all, if your production is stagnated and you have an increasing population, okay, even under normal circumstances, you still have a gap because we are getting quite a bit of imports from Tanzania and from Uganda. So even in a normal year, we are still getting some, imports into the country. But now put it into a situation where you are in a bad year. It makes a bad situation worse. So Kenya's production or key food crops has stagnated, and we're importing a lot of it. And that needs to be addressed, even in a normal year.
But that's something you never hear about outside of policymaker circles, agricultural circles, I mean, like yours. I mean, no one, I don't go to conferences and people are talking about the lack or the stagnation of agricultural productivity, at least in the Kenyan context. Why are we ignoring it?
Well, people are talking about it. The problem is whether or not we are doing anything about it, because we have gone on and there's a lot of evidence by FAO, by institutions such as Tegemeo and others, IFPRI, that shows that our productivity is stagnating. And with an increasing population, that we are actually increasing our imports. And this country, you know very well that we spend about $1.3 million to import food, basic food.
Yeah.
$1 billion to import basic food. So it is recognized. Whether or not we are doing anything about it, it's another issue altogether.
Right. And let's talk about those countries you mentioned, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia. These are usually our usual sources of maize. But all of them have been hit particularly badly by drought in the course of the last year. So if, on one hand, our source markets have been hit by drought, and now we're in drought, so we have to plug in that gap with imports. I mean, it sounds like we're caught between the proverbial rock and the hard place.
So under normal circumstances, we've always been importing maize from South Africa. Last year, let's say Southern Africa, because we import maize from Southern Africa. Sometimes from Zambia, sometimes even from Malawi. We've gotten maize coming from Malawi anyway. So Southern Tanzania produces excess maize, by the way. Northern Tanzania produces a lot of maize. We're talking about Kilimanjaro region. They produce a lot of maize, which filters into Kenya. Now, southern part of Africa was facing a huge drought last year, which means that is not going to be a source for imports. Because they've essentially shut down their markets. Because they haven't even gotten to there. Actually, do you know that maize was being exported from Congo-Brazzaville, where you have large-scale farmers, South African large-scale farmers, into South Africa. So today they do not have stocks, we cannot get it. The second problem that we are grappling with is that we have banned GMOs into the country. So even if we are to import maize into Kenya, it can only be non-GMO unless we unban
But
GMO.
Doesn't that limit our sources? Because I mean, South Africa is a huge producer of GM maize.
Exactly.
The Americans have a lot of GM crops as well, and they're big producers, but we've essentially just locked all their imports out.
Now the source, you see, you have to put in another constraint for the Kenyan market because it must be white maize.
Yes.
The source of white non-GMO maize is very limited. The source of white GMO maize is wide. Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, sometimes when they have a crop, that is wider. But if you have now to go to non-GMO white maize, the source is mainly Mexico and a few other countries. So we are caught between a rock and hard place in this particular time.
Wow, that's particularly rough. Okay, this line stood out for me from the National Drought Management Agency. Earlier this month, they said, and I'm quoting them here, without urgent and appropriate action, Kenya could see a repeat of the drought situation in 2011. And that particular drought cost us billions of dollars to resolve. What do we need to start doing now to ensure we don't get to a 2011-like situation?
I think the first thing is, like I have said, the prediction is that the short rains, which is going to produce a crop to come into place from July, August, September, the wrong rains are expected to be late and inadequate. That tells you that the stocks that we have, which we are not very sure, we are being told that we have enough stock to last us until June. Assuming that we have even stocks to last us until June, it means that we have to import up to probably the end of the year before we can get the short rains in October. So it means that we definitely need to start putting in measures for import so that at least for the commercial market, you always have people getting maize into the market. But at the same on the same hand, we have to make sure that we are very well coordinated in terms of relief distribution. Remember, in 2009, we established a call center where people, I don't know whether you're going to remember that there was a call center where people who were facing food insecurity could call a number, and then through Red Cross, that was well coordinated. Now we need to start using technology, for instance, to be able to monitor hotspots, and then we use distribution mechanisms to ensure that that is in place. So those are some of the things that we need to do now as we monitor. And even, it takes 3 months to bring a shipload of maize. So if we have to bring in maize by July, by April, we need to start now. So those are decisions that I'm sure government will be making, or they've made them.
Last year, well, not last year, 2015, we imported about 500,000 or so tons of maize into the country. So this year's figure presumably will be much bigger than that.
In a normal year, like we said, we do get informal imports from Tanzania. We get quite a bit from Tanzania. From Uganda. Uganda produces a lot of maize for us. In the better days, Southern Sudan was also producing maize. These days, It's not. No, it's not happening. So we always get some surprise from those countries. When there is deficit, like for instance, because Southern Africa, Malawi, Zambia were experiencing a drought. So the base from southern part of Tanzania was going to Southern Africa. We were only getting a bit from northern part of Tanzania. I'm sure now Tanzania will close its borders silently so that nothing is coming in, and that's why we need to be, looking outwardly.
Right. Two last questions for you, very quickly, if I may. And this is something I read even before I got into this business as a journalist. We lose about 30% of our harvest from our farms, and this essentially covers our main grain crops, wheat, maize especially. And I've seen that figure year after year after year after year. Why haven't we solved it? Why is post-harvest losses such a difficult nut to crack?
There's a lot of discussion worldwide and in Africa. If you talk about agricultural transformation in Africa, there's a lot of discussion now that if you save what you already produce, actually that reduces your deficit by significant proportion. So in Kenya, yes, we lose 30% post-harvest. It starts from the way you harvest. Our harvesting is manual. Worldwide, corn harvesting or cane harvesting or whatever it is mechanized, which means that they go into the cob and they turn the grains and they are all corrected in one place. So the way we harvest, the technologies we are using for harvesting, we need to change them so that we can minimize that. If you harvest, the way now you handle the commodity, we lose through aflatoxin. There's a big proportion that we lose again through aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is about storage, is about humidity, and so on. Then as you are moving it from the point of supply production to the deficit, those are the transporting mechanisms. The way you transport,
yes,
in open lorries and whatever, we are losing more. So it's said that if you put in 10 bags of maize in a truck, you probably get to your destination, if it is in Nairobi, with 9 bags. 1 bag will have been lost because of the pilferage and so on. So it's technology driven. It's us sitting down and saying that we need to move our agriculture to the next level so that we not only raise our productivity, but we also retain what we harvest.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being.